Hello, friends. Joe Dimino here. I just wanted to let you know that after 30 years or so, I have finally released my first book of poetry through the mighty Spartan Press here in Kansas City, Missouri. As the creator and host of both Neon Jazz Radio and the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino podcast, along with being a visual artist, I'm ready to embark on a new adventure and want you to be a part of it. You can get a copy online via Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and actually on the streets in Kansas City at the great Prospero's bookstore off 39th Street. You can also visit joedimino.com for links to the book, to more poetry, and everything in my world, including paintings. Thanks for all of the love and support over the years, and please dig the words. Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with business leader and author of the Concierge Class, Kit Sadgrove. His new book, The Concierge Class, is all about an unseen group of middle-class professionals who work for corporations and the ultra-wealthy. They're the magicians, the enablers, the pushers, and the suppliers. They're found in countless professions, from economists to scientists, and from lawyers to think tanks. The result, he says, is a widening of inequality, growing political unrest, and a loss of trust in democracy. He has run his own successful company for 2 decades, so he's not anti-business. On the contrary, he understands the challenges that small and medium-sized businesses face, and he has first-hand experience of the way large corporations fix the market to the detriment, he says, of the customers and suppliers. He's a fascinating professional with plenty of great stories. Enjoy this interview. It's great to meet you. Where are you located on the planet?
I am living in a small town called Frome in Somerset in England.
Right
so
on.
It is cold, but sunny.
Okay. Yeah, I'm in Kansas City, Missouri, and we're just coming out. Actually, a week ago, we had a flash blizzard, and it was
You had a
wild.
snowstorm, didn't you?
Yeah. So, but
I
we're
guess
coming out of it, and sun's shining. It's getting warm. The squirrels are hopping around, so it's all good.
spring is in the air.
Yes. It certainly is. So it's good. Well, man, I love your story. Thank you so much for taking a minute out today. It's wonderful to talk to you.
I'm honored to be here, Joe.
So let's begin our journey into your life as a writer and the author of the Concierge Class by asking you this. 5 years ago, we're coming up on the anniversary of the pandemic, and I'm wondering how much of living through that COVID-era pandemic has influenced the way that you live life and write and do things today.
Do you know, I got very frustrated during COVID because, like other people, I had a business to run. We had customers, I had work colleagues, we had product to get out the door because we promised it to them, and we weren't allowed to mingle together for every good reason, because we didn't want to spread the plague, if you like. As the boss, I was entitled to go into the office. But you know what, Joe? I do think, looking back, that most people have almost forgotten what it was like. I mean, some people have very strong memories of it, and some people are still suffering long COVID. What is uppermost in my mind is what happens the next time, because there will be a next time, because we are a global society. You can get from the States to Asia in 10 hours or something like that, maybe. And I know there are government people, who look out for asteroids that will come and hit the Earth and maybe take us back to the Ice Age. And I wonder, do we have enough people preparing for the next pandemic? And I think that's a bit scary.
Yeah, and I think I'm getting a little bit nervous because in America, what's been going on with this administration and them stripping away all of these levels of health and human services oversight, it's starting to make me nervous because this all began in earnest here under the same president, same leadership.
Absolutely. The UK government was very reluctant, I think, to introduce protections for people, and I understand why. And there are issues about independence and freedom and stuff. And as a society, we have to manage the balance between freedom for the individual and security and protection for the community. And that's a very hard one for any government to manage. And we just got to hope that, there are grown-ups in the room who will understand both sides and protect society while also allowing us our freedoms as well.
The one thing I will say, and I talked to my son about this. My son's on the autism spectrum, and when this was really raging, I think for the younger generations, it was hard for them to wrap their heads around how did this
Mhm.
happen, what's going on. And I will tell you this categorically, 100% as an American. President Obama stopped SARS and COVID-11 from spreading, and he
Mm,
had a specific office that localized and zapped it from becoming a global pandemic. That
mm,
exact same office was completely 86th by Trump.
mm, mm.
So, as stewards of government and looking out for the health of massive populations, if you don't do things to be preventative or ready to leap on something, you're only putting yourself at a disadvantage. I will say that.
I think any politician has to be aware of conflicting arguments, and the grown-up politician has to try and bring both sides together and not be divisive.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we need in politicians. The USA, like other countries, like Britain, is very divided, and I think for very understandable reasons. And I think you've got to look back at Kennedy and people like that in the past, um, who have. I mean, when Kennedy said, "Think not what the government can do for you, but what can you do? What can you do for America?" And I think we're all one big community, and we have to work together, yeah,
Yeah,
and understand each other as well.
yeah, we certainly do. So let's get to the good work that you're doing here in 2025. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third grade students. It's career day, and one of the kids in the back of the room is curious and is like, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer that child?
So I would say, Joe, I would say I'm a gadfly. I'm an irritant. Um, I think we need to ask questions about the world and about ourselves and other people. And a gadfly can jump from, one horse to another and irritate it. And I think it was, a case of Socrates, the philosopher in Athens back in the 5th century BC, and he would go around and ask people in Athens, like, and he would talk to them, and they would say, "I think Athens is the best city in the world," and he would say, "Is it? What about?" I don't know, Sparta or somewhere. And he would irritate them, but he would challenge their values. So I would say being a gadfly, which is what I do a bit, is very irritating. But I think it's necessary and it allows you to open yourself up to other ideas. Of course, poor old Socrates suffered because the Athenians got very cross with him because he used to talk to the young people, and they then used to argue with their parents, and so they put him on trial. And they said, right, we're going to sentence you to death for corrupting the young, by which they meant teaching them to answer back. And he said, okay, fine, if that's the rules, if that's the law, then fine. And they said, well, you could come up with another suggestion like exile or whatever. And he said, if that's the law, then that's the law, because he was a bit cantankerous, I think. And they put him in jail, and his friends came along and said, look, we'll open the doors of the prison at night and you can escape and go into exile. And he said, no, law, I obey the laws of the country. So yeah, he was a very irritating individual. Fortunately, we do not usually execute philosophers anymore. But I think if I was to be talking to young people, I would say yes, go out and be irritating, which is what young people should be doing.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And I think that's the thing about this very divided world that we're living in, that philosophy, that mindset of asking questions and poking further is actually very essential. And I think there's a complacency that has kind of been put over people, and they're just kind of going with it because they're either afraid or they don't think they're going to make a difference. But there used to be times in our collective histories as both of our countries where those kinds of things would not be seen as detriments. They would be encouraged.
I think that's right. And I think the challenge we all have is not to see ourselves as being in a particular box. I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, I'm a follower of this person or that person, because I think that's quite limiting. Um, and yeah, I think looking at the world and learning from tested sources as opposed to the bubble that we live in. I mean, I'm as guilty as anyone. I tend to read the media that I like, and that is a real risk. So I need to go out and buy newspapers that have, or watch television produced by other broadcasters that I wouldn't otherwise watch, and listen to what they say. There is a newspaper that I read that sometimes brings people from two opposite sides of the argument, and they sit and chat over lunch. And what is fascinating is that they go away thinking, well, he wasn't such an idiot as I thought he was going to be. you know?
Absolutely. So let me ask you this. What did you want to be when you were in the third grade? What was your dream life? What did you want to grow up and become?
Joe, I was I was a very superficial individual in those days. I wanted to be a millionaire.
Yeah.
And then you look back on it now and you think that's a very limiting kind of idea. I think if you are poor or if you're very short of money, then actually it's really a nice idea to be rich because having money solves a lot of problems. Of course it does. Uh, Now that I'm an older person, I think, yeah, but there's a lot more to life than just making a lot of money. Um, but I understand that making money is it's an interesting aspiration to actually to be rich. I mean, there's nothing wrong with wanting to be rich because you can then enrich other people and you can do things with money. If you look at Gates, for example, I mean, he is single-handedly solving the problem of malaria in Africa because he has a lot of money. I'm not saying he's a perfect human being, but I think that was what I wanted to be when I was in the third grade. Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about what were some foundational elements for you to become a gadfly, to become a writer, to evolve into who you are. What were those seeds that were planted into you that have grown into who you are today?
So when I was young, Joe, I didn't like sports. I didn't like organized sports. I was not a jock. I liked to sit and talk to people. And I think maybe I discovered that I was interested in creating projects. I mean, you've got your jazz, you've got your famous interviews, and I do wonder whether you're not someone who just finds interesting things to do and then you go and do them. So when I was young, yeah, I did lots of little projects and I still do that. I have just I've just invented a new computer keyboard. I'm waiting for the USPTO, the Patent Office, to approve it. I have a patent in the UK. So I think that is about getting a lot of fun out of life. Um, so yeah, did I change much when I was a child? Were the influences? I don't know, Joe. I wonder whether or not we tend to be the person that we were when we were young, unless something fundamentally happens to you and you decide, I have to do something different now. I don't know. What do you think?
I think it's kind of like the caterpillar that turns into a butterfly
Mhm.
and decides to kind of become the eye of the hurricane. I think there's so many changes that are a part of our world, from our early development to the friends that we run into, the education that we seek, the interests that get us going, the occupational forces that make us make money, to the people that we marry, to the kids that we make. I think the beauty of this life is this evolutionary cycle that will inevitably change us. And I think it's necessary and wonderful. I think there's kind of a conventional thinking that you shouldn't change that much in your life. There's a level of static that should happen. But I think the progressive people that change and fail and succeed throughout life are the ones that are most intriguing. And I think that's the backbone to a really good humanity.
And indeed so. And isn't failure interesting as well? I was looking at a website the other day, do you know that, where an IT guy listed all the little programs he'd invented and launched. And he came to the conclusion that 95% of the things he'd done were failures. And I thought it was very brave of him to do that because normally we only talk about our big successes, don't we? And I don't know about you, Joe, but I look back and so many things I've failed at. And like people say, you should just treat that as being one step closer to success and finding out the real you. And that's why we have to keep on experimenting with life. And yeah, we do change through life. We do. And if you see big political change, and there has been political change in the late 70s, there was political change at the end of the Second World War. And we're seeing political change now, not only in the States, but also in Britain and Europe and elsewhere. And I just think, in a way, that's an opportunity for all of us to think, what should I be doing? Am I doing the right thing at present? Do I need to change my opinion? Yeah, yeah. I think it's about learning, isn't it, really, as things change through our life. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, I think it's essential. Um, so I'm curious in your life and in your career and what you've accomplished, who have been kind of who's been the hero, the inspirational bedrock for you?
Do you know, Joe, I'm always a little suspicious of people. And I do worry that maybe they have feet of clay because I have feet of clay, as in I have my own weaknesses and vulnerabilities. The people that I looked up to, well, we all have a teacher, don't we? There's a teacher called Mel Morrow. He was Australian, and he kind of rescued me at school from the dreary drabness of going to play team games and being beaten every week, because it was a very kind of not, it was not a military kind of school. It was a private school, and you got beaten a lot. So there are people who, yes, who are heroes. As I was growing up, as I went to university, for example, in the UK, there was a politician called Tony Benn, and I think your American listeners and viewers probably wouldn't recognize him. He was, if you like, maybe the sort of Bernie Sanders of his day, and he would ask questions, and he wouldn't go along with a popular opinion, and he challenged people. And so, yeah, and so many people. I mean, you look at Gandhi, for example, the idea of pushing back against, in his case, colonialism, and it could be very cruel at colonialism, and he would not go into violence at all. Um, and again in South Africa, where they attained a certain level of peace and understanding between black and white, due to leadership. So those kind of people, I think, are really important to show us the way, if you like, a righteous way.
Yeah, what's interesting with Tony Blair, I remember, at that time, George W. Bush and the Iraq War was happening and all of those things. And I think there was a lot of people that didn't expect Tony to be so much on the side of what we were doing because we didn't find any evidence of weapons of mass destruction. But I
No,
always
indeed.
did, I always admired what he did and was surprised. But I mean that we were allies. I mean that's what you do.
Yeah. Yes, and even earlier than that, um, before my time really was Harold Wilson was a UK Prime Minister. And again, many of your listeners may not be familiar, but he decided bravely that he was not going to go into the Vietnam War. And for a British Prime Minister who was very much a subordinate player in world politics, to stand up and say we won't do that. That took, I think, courage. We are now moving to a new world order, people say, where the United States, in its current form, is not willing to act as the world's police officer. And that takes us into a whole and interesting new world, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, it's certainly, before the election happened, there was so much anxiety and uncertainty, and things they were just at a fever pitch in America. And I remember reading a book about it showed the parallelisms between George Orwell and Winston Churchill and went through their lives and how much of what they were doing kind of intersected and who they were. And it was fascinating to see history from that lens of what we don't ever want to either evolve into or what we don't want to adopt, kind of the idea of Hitler and Stalin and all of those things. It was really interesting to see how politics tends to be a carousel. And if we're not careful and good students of history, we are bound to repeat it.
Yes, I know that in the 50s, going into the 60s, a lot of people saw the Soviet Union as being a better society than, if you like, American capitalism. And a lot of people were not prepared to face up to Stalin's purges. And I think we have to recognize every society's strengths and its weaknesses and be honest about them and not just say we are the best or we are the worst. There has to be, good and bad in most things, not in everything, but yeah. Yeah.
So let me ask you this. If you could meet one person alive on the planet right now that you find fascinating, and you could spend some time with them, ask some questions, maybe somebody that would help you on your path, who would that be?
I think it would be very interesting to have a long conversation with Donald Trump and JD Vance because I don't understand them. And is there any point in me talking to my heroes, I wonder? Because they'll say the things that I want to hear. And all I would need is to get a chance to get a word in edgeways, I think, with Mr. Trump and Mr. Vance. But I might learn something and maybe through conversation and over lunch we could come to an agreement over certain things. He could give a bit, I could give a bit, and maybe that would be a good thing.
You know, along those same lines, I remember watching the Beatles anthology in the 90s, and it was so well done. And there was one point in there where when the Beatles came to America, there was like a list of people they wanted to meet. Elvis was number one, but close behind that was Bob Dylan, and they went to a party with Bob. And Paul McCartney said at one point they smoked a little bit and got a little heady about things, and he wrote down the meaning of life in his pocket, and the next morning he couldn't find it. That would be a fun conversation between those two
Yeah,
to get to a point where Paul thought he had the meaning of life figured out and put that slip of paper in his pocket.
yeah, yeah.
That would be fascinating.
It would be, and I think what is lovely is that as you see McCartney go into old age, and he has retained that strength of character not to be overawed by fame, which is a difficult thing to be and retain, isn't it? Because I have certainly been through periods of my life where I thought I was the great I am, and have found in subsequent years that I wasn't, and actually not being so great or having some misfortune is a great teacher, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yes, to see the Beatles, I've seen McCartney play, and the tragedy is to hear his voice getting worse and worse. Whereas some other singers have retained their voice, and I almost don't want to hear him sing anymore because, to me, that's a little private tragedy. Although he does have a band which kind of hits the high notes for him to keep him on track.
Yeah.
And that's still nice.
Yeah, certainly. So the Concierge Class is such a wonderful book. It's such a great way of looking at how the middle class works and how all of it comes together. Talk to me a little bit about this book.
So, Joe, a lot of us are very aware of the growing gap between ordinary folks and the ultra rich. It's not the top 10%, it's not even the 1%, it's the 1/10 to 1% who have such a vast amount of money, they don't know what to do with it. And the corporations and these very rich individuals, often one and the same. So, there's Mr. Bezos and Amazon, they are basically one and the same. And the same is true, not just in that, but you look at, say, steel with Mr. Mittal, who owns Mittal Steel and so on. So we all look at the ultra rich, we look at corporations, we think something must be done. But in my view, there is another group, which is the concierge class, who are the middle class professionals who actually make it happen. Because the ultra rich don't have the time and don't have the interest or the skills to do the things they do to keep them rich and make them richer. And the same applies to the corporations. So I say there are four types or four categories of the concierge class. And so there are the magicians who can make money disappear. So if you have a a lot of money, you can use these guys to make your profits disappear and hide them away in other countries, tax havens, for example. And then there are the enablers like the politicians and others who can make sure that legislation works in the favor of the rich and the corporations and not for every man. And then you have the pushers. The pushers are the people who pump out kind of like propaganda in favor of the freedom for the individual and reducing the size of the state and all of these things which are important and are valuable. But if you then find that the state is too small to protect us, so we need police officers on the streets, we need teachers in the schools, we need paramedics to come in an ambulance to pick you up if you're hurt, we need nurses, we need doctors, and some of these things, especially in not necessarily totally in America, but certainly in other places, the state provides these things. So the middle classes, these concierge class members, sometimes pump out opinions that then go into the newspapers, or also, and the media, TV stations present this opinion that private enterprise is massive, is important, which of course it is, but it shouldn't be to the detriment of the community. And we don't really have private as a kind of pure competition that, for example, the economists, typically another group of pushers, say we have. And finally, you then got the suppliers who supply goods and services to the ultra rich and the corporations. So, for example, you have, say, people who create and run platform recruitment places. So where I live, I see guys turning up in slightly battered old cars and collecting pizzas from a well-known pizza chain, and they get in their car and they drive off. And I think it's really sad that the corporation is hiring people on a platform to be self-employed, apparently, to deliver pizzas. And so there is a big gig community out there where people don't have proper employment protection. So these are all the members of the concierge class. And it's not really about, you need to be honest with yourself and you need to say, am I doing good for society? Is the company I work for, is the job I'm doing benefiting society, or is it harming society? And that's a difficult thing to look at.
So at the end of the day, Kit, I'm curious, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, everyone that gets your book, everyone that's worked with you, that knows you, but ultimately you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Well, I like to see myself as a bit of a creative. I like little projects. I think I mentioned my new keyboard. The computer keyboard has not changed since, well, there have been various iterations of it. And I have a new one. And I can't tell you what it is because the USPTO hasn't given me a patent on it yet. But I'm hoping it'll come. And then I get bored with that and I go and do something else. So yeah, I think finger in many pies, which is what you do, Joe, is fun. I like that. I have a theatre company, a little community theatre company, which I founded, and we put on small plays in rooms above pubs, and I just think, isn't that great? And we give actors and directors the opportunity to put on plays and do their lines, and audiences can come along and enjoy the play and have a good time and drink in the pub and put money into the pub as well.
I love it. So if anyone wants to pick up a copy of your book, anybody has any questions, they want to reach out or delve further into all of these wonderful pursuits in your life, where do they go?
So thank you for asking. So the Concierge Class is available on Amazon. So the Concierge Class by Kit Sadgrove. And if they want, I love people to talk to me. So if they were to go to my website, Kit Sadgrove, it's my name, .org, kitsadgrove.org, they will find my book and some of the other things I do. And it would be lovely to chat to people.
Wonderful. Kit, this has been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your story. Thank you for your time. And best of luck. Keep spreading the light in the world.
It's been a privilege, Joe. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, business, spirituality, music, and more from around the globe. Our esteemed theme music was composed and produced by the great E.E. Pointer of Kansas City's River Cow Orchestra. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. You can also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and until next time. Hello, friends. Joe Dimino here. I just wanted to let you know that after 30 years or so, I have finally released my first book of poetry through the mighty Spartan Press here in Kansas City, Missouri. As the creator and host of both Neon Jazz Radio and the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino podcast, along with being a visual artist, I'm ready to embark on a new adventure and want you to be a part of it. You can get a copy online via Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and actually on the streets in Kansas City at the great Prospero's bookstore off 39th Street. You can also visit joedimino.com for links to the book, to more poetry, and everything in my world, including paintings. Thanks for all of the love and support over the years, and please dig the words.